Hello, everyone. Welcome to MindBrews on the Spot, where we brew up thought provoking conversations on culture, technology, and society. In this episode, we dive deep into the Olympic circus that happened in 2024. And we want to talk about why India is settling for like bronze and it's being celebrated to that extent. So, without any further ado, let's get into the podcast. So with me here today, I've got Karan. He is a sports enthusiast and just like us wants to discuss about the topic. So Karan, please.
First of all, thanks to Shivangi for giving me such a nice intro, and I'm excited to be talk about this very interesting year that we've had in Olympics, because there were multiple narratives regarding how the country has performed in the Olympics and what are its implications for the future. And there's a lot to talk about, both in terms of the sporting culture of India and where it's headed.
So we're basically going to cover like what happened during the Paris Olympics in 2024, why it's very significant in Indian media, and what makes India's Olympic coverage like this, like competition or only a media narrative. So we're going to start by like discussing like why there is always like media drama in sporting events in India. And maybe like as far as we know, India just loves like a good narrative, right? Like Indian media is always like that. So be it sports or otherwise, the lines are like very thin between fact and fiction. So Karan, why do you think our media is so obsessed with turning everything into a story?
Well, first of all, the nature of I feel you partially answered the question yourself, because it is the Indian media. It loves the headline, loves the drama, and we're quite famous globally and even across continents for taking the emotional route to everything. And not just in the Indian media. You look at Indian advertising, any
Right.
brands and products, they always they use nostalgia as a bait. They use things like, for example, Amul, one of the most famous advertising triumphs in India. They always connect the Amul girl to whatever else is going on in Indian pop culture, what used
Well,
to happen. And I feel that and psychologically, and it's not no secret that Indians are extremely emotional people, and even there are a lot of great Indian writers and journalists who've been covering sports. But I feel objectively, what we do is even if it's instinctual, even if it's not intentional, we'll create some genuinely great sports reporting, and then we'll connect it to some sentimental route, be it national sentiment or personal sentiment. And as usual, while to the layman terms, like if somebody in Norway is reading about India's performance in Olympics, he or she would be just interested in what are the results, what are the medals, who's an upcoming athlete, exciting athlete to watch. But from our perspective, as Shivangi would agree, we've turned this into somewhat of a soap opera, where we've connected the personal lives of athletes to their professional performance. As Shivangi, would you like to elaborate?
yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's in like our blood or something. We have like all these movies and songs, and it's all about drama, and like, it's everywhere. So I think the Olympic Games simply should be about winning and losing. I think we've discussed this. Whereas, here right now, it's just being about narratives. And if you take Manu Bhaker's bronze medal win, for example, on one hand, it is a victory. But on the other hand, it's like embarrassing in a way, like the way they're being celebrating, like as if it's the greatest achievement India has ever had, you know?
Yeah.
And I think you can even talk about the Vinesh Phogat saga, right?
Oh, we get to that. Yeah. I mean, just to mention, you're talking about performance, right? So first of all, let's just throw our hands up in the air, because we've only got 6 medals in 2020, which is 5 bronze and 1 silver.
Yeah.
Now, an average person would sort of look in, if they're honest, would they ask, is it enough? Because we're a country of 1.4 billion people with a fairly functional economy. We've got a lot of unicorn startups, we've got the MNCs. and and India has total won 40 Olympics medals overall. And just to give you the context, China has won 33 in 2004 itself. And we know how within ourselves we sort of, the narrative that we like to peddle ourselves is that we're a progressive country, we're doing very well, we're catching up to the West. Look at how Indians are doing well abroad. And you know what, how we react to the medal is somewhat of a sense of awe. Wow, 6 medals in 2024.
Before all of this, we also want to give a disclaimer that we don't think that any of the performers or like medalists did not deserve it, or they probably worked really really hard, and we respect them. This is just about India overall, like how we should be performing better as a country. But Karan, continue.
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Shivangi. It's somewhat of the thing, we feel that we are too latched on to our confirmation biases. We want to believe that India is doing so well that we're going to twist any narrative that comes into the Indian sphere into sort of something that favors us. Now, to be honest, everybody does that anyway. You know, from the most powerful people in countries to the to to somebody who just got sued, for something, they'll try and twist the narrative to their own convenience. Sometimes the general sentiment is that it's maybe trying to cover up for something or hide something, which be it insecurity or anything else. But we'll discuss that later on. But from an objective perspective, from a sports fan perspective, let's just take it from a sports fan perspective. We have to be honest and say that the performances have not really been up par, and we've got some real actual sports people to back it up. I'm sure you'll agree with me, Shivangi.
Yeah, I do. So, I mean, coming back to the media frenzy, one of the most notable things to talk about in this Olympics, especially, was Vinesh Phogat, who is an Indian wrestler, and she's been through a lot regarding her wins and like ups and downs, but the media's treatment of her has been like a circus act, and I think it's worth to discuss the point and how complex these like media people make her story. And and at the end we're just left with like a very blurry image of what is fact, what is fiction, what is just plain media hype you know and it's not just about her performance. And like I said, it's about how media is projecting her performance, and like while other countries just focus on the results, here's like all the drama, right? So do we like really build our athletes to just tear them down? What do you think, Karan?
Yeah, and we do that because whether we like it or not, the media business and the business of sports have become so interlinked that it's impossible to separate one from the other. You can say that about other industries as well, media industry and the film industry or the tech industry, because it's almost, we talk about this era being the cult of individualism, right? We champion individuals. Mark Zuckerberg is the guy who made Facebook. This person is the guy who started this company. This director made this movie. So we sometimes forget that it's actually collaborative effort in everything.
Right.
And while the society in general tends to give the credit for a lot of things to one person, I feel we do it more than other people. It's this very nice quote from David Fincher, the director, right? So he said that if this movie gets great reviews, then I get all the credit. If this movie gets bad reviews and doesn't do well at the box office, then I get too much blame. So that's what's happening in the era of sports as well. That instead of the narrative being how many medals did India win, how many competitions, how far did India go in such and such competitions, how is our national progress throughout the last 40 years in different fields, be it swimming, archery, the narrative has now become who is Vinesh Phogat, who is she dating, what does she represent, who is Manu Bhaker, and we've sort of deifying the individual. So it's become about them rather than, because they're not the only two people who are participating in the Olympics, right? Shivangi?
Right. So, I mean, this all boils on Karan is like very well summed up. Like, why India is like, it brings me to my next question, like, why is India behind in sports? And, like, what exactly prevents India from excelling across sports disciplines globally? And, like, why are we just not, performing as well as the other leading countries in these like world stages?
Well, if you hear it from Mr. Prakash Padukone, who is an actual successful athlete who was consistent throughout his career, he's basically he's talking about badminton, which is the sport of his choice, and he was open about the fact that we are not that great. He's the exact headline on India Today stated, "High time shuttlers took responsibility." And he was pretty open about the fact that the people who competed for the Olympics in the shuttles were just on the India spectrum were just not up to the mark to other countries. PV Sindhu has also admitted this multiple times that collectively we at the quality of the athletes we produce, we cannot hope to compete for silver year in each and every competition, year in year out, every Olympics. And what happens is once we get the to full credit to her for winning the bronze, but when she won the bronze, that in itself became an event and everybody just latched on to that. And as a result of that, that became a narrative, and the woman also obviously benefited from that. The level of media exposure she got for just a bronze was, some might
Yeah.
say, completely.
Yeah. So I mean, this brings me like, I feel like it's a mix of everything, right? There's also, I feel like, poor infrastructure or like less funding, because I think that in general they have like people who are from the Olympics or have excelled are like excelling athletes, right?
Yeah.
They have come out and openly said in the media that they've gotten very less or little attention or funding when they were trying and like building their some cells up, right? And there's this like even Saina Nehwal has like spoken very clearly about how she's almost got no support ever since her success,
Mm.
right? And I think that's a real problem. Like, there is no denying the fact that we do have talent, but maybe the system lets them down. Like, can we really expect our athletes to match up to the world's best while not being as well equipped or trained, you know? And this also brings me to another point, which is the Paralympics of 2024 and how India has absolutely been crushing it
Exactly.
in the Paralympics with the Paralympics team. They have been doing so well, and I can bet that they have gotten much less attention compared to these like Manu Bhaker and Vinesh Phogat, etc., etc. Now, I'm not saying that they didn't deserve the attention or funding that they got, but if the Paralympics team is performing so well, do you think India is still going to continue funding them and like pushing them up? Or will they just again lose focus and it'll be a one win time situation thing, and we'll see it again in the next 30 years, maybe once?
I mean, I would love nothing more for in the Paralympics. It's even we talk about people loving narratives, and it's even a bigger narrative. It's like Paralympics where people have less advantages. We're succeeding more there. So, and
Yep.
that becomes sort of a counterpoint to people, to athletes who often sort of, they're right sometimes, but sometimes they deflect from their own poor performance, because it's always easy for an athlete to blame the facilities and the coach to why they're not doing well, right? And in terms of India, you can absolutely do that. You can be an archer, you can underperform for 8 years, and you can always point the finger at somebody else, and you would be right in some capacity. But what I feel is, now that we were doing so well in Paralympics, right now, if people are honest, if journalists are honest, if sports journalists are honest, and if they want to do their jobs, they will ask some serious, honest questions. The fact that clearly, since the Paralympics we've done so well, it clearly shows that those people have some mentality, some desire to compete, some desire to better themselves, and
Yep.
and
And I think that it's also about like how an athlete in India especially, or actually for that matter anywhere, how they sort of earn in a way is also taking in brand endorsements and brand deals, right?
yeah, which is fair. If it comes with great performance, earn as much as you want.
Yeah, do you really think that compared to maybe Saina Nehwal and the exposure that all of these great athletes got, like Sachin Tendulkar and everyone, do you really think that these Paralympic athletes are going to get such brand endorsements and brand deals? And if they are not going to get it, then where, like, will they get the funding and support where which the regular athletes do get?
What personally, what would be the best scenario would be if I do feel we're talking about media, right? And it's amazing that we did so well in the Paralympics, and the story just went away, just disappeared. People like Sania Nehwal, Manu Bhaker, they're still getting the coverage. What if somebody, if people go talk to these people, I'm sure they will have a lot to say. They have a lot to share. It would be great to see para people with disadvantages get the same financial opportunities as well. But then again, when we talk about financial opportunities for athletes, the best ones, it's the best ones who perform consistently. You have to deliver something for the country and something for your employers, and as a result, people view you as an aspirational figure. This is something we'll get to that later, because we also have a habit of viewing athletes as maybe deifying them and viewing them as more aspirational as maybe even they would like to. But what I would love to do is the success in the Paralympics to contradict the traditional Indian underperformance narrative.
Yep, and I think that a lot of athletes also um, use like athletics and this like stage where they perform well as sort of like a launch pad, right, to like their success in other areas. And I feel like some athletes, while we will talk about that, but some athletes like seem to lose their hunger once they taste a little bit of their success, right? Unlike the Novaks and the Serenas of the world who are driven by like this desire to
That's
be the
their
best.
main thing. That's their life.
Yeah, many of our athletes just want to get by. They think of it as a career choice only, and they just perform once or twice, and that's all we ever hear of them. Which brings me to my next point. Do Indians have like these projection issues or inferiority complexes? What do you think, Karan?
Yeah. So see, so this is a very interesting topic you just brought up, right? And let's just get into the mind of these athletes as well, because let's just defend them for a little bit. Now, and this happens in every field, people who jump to their field to achieve success in others, they're generally viewed as very skeptically. But what we do in India is that we do have massive projection issues. Like most of us are fully aware that we are sports wise, we're not up to the mark, but we still, everybody will still, if you've been in Twitter, which I'm sure you have, people still quite sort of hyping it up before the Olympics started, that this time we'll win gold, this time we'll win this. Yeah, in the same way we do that for everything. So these athletes come into a lot of pressure as well. And while we can always pinpoint at Manu Bhaker, but you have to realize she has to deal with a lot of people who are expecting a lot of things from her, which maybe internally she knows that she might not quite be able to deliver. And when that delivery doesn't happen, when they don't succeed, then we pile on the criticism. The media does it, the audience does it. So what we do is that we inflate our expectations, we build these people up to godlike statuses, and then when we don't get to what we really bring them down to the level which that really shouldn't happen.
Makes sense. And I think it's definitely worth thinking about. Like, there's so much like rhetoric regarding like making the country proud, but it sounds
No, go on.
it sounds at times like we're just projecting our insecurities on these poor athletes, right? Like, they're just, at the end of the day, it is their career and they're just doing their jobs, and we sort of turn them into deities or villains depending on the outcome. I mean, I'm sure if you've ever watched any Tendulkar movie, you will see how people behave, or if you were there at that time, if he ever lost, or him or Dhoni ever lost like a match, they would burn these straw made corpses out of their houses to like sort of threaten them and show them that you deserve to die. and then even like slander their wives and children for no reason, absolutely no reason. And it's so detrimental to society when you see it like this, that our society is functioning in a way where we take these actors and put them to a level where they are like praised and worshipped like gods. And when they don't do what we want them to do, right, because we are the ones who are giving them this seat, right, that's the ego that we have, then we take it and just tear them down. And it's honestly degrading how we treat them. And we forget that they are also just doing their jobs, right? And they're fulfilling their dreams. Like while they're doing it for the country, it's their personal dreams as well. They're coming to your office and burning your like a poster with your face on it because you didn't submit the article on time or your work assignment on time, right? They're also just trying to reach their own. But the way we behave with them, I think, is just it needs a lot of attention.
I think that you mentioned the word ego, right? That in itself, brings up an interesting thing. Do we feel that we are sort of depressed in a way because India has been a very young country, right? We're slowly catching up, and throughout
Right.
the time, we not that always in a derogatory way, but it was fun to make jokes about Indians if you're somebody from the West or something, and
Yeah.
what we failed to do is we never took them in the stride, because we always took things personally, even though they don't really mean to insult us. But do you feel that there's this sense of we feel a bit of disappointment in the way India is shaking up, the collective disappointment, like it's equal culture?
My
Yeah.
opinion, I think that given India's history, and I'm not going to get into history as much, but
No.
being a colonized country for so long, we have lost so much. And we're trying to regain our footing, and we are developing as a country. And yes, we're doing amazing, right? For a country.
They're not big, yeah.
Yeah. But I also think because of that, the people, like we as people, are someone who are constantly trying to prove ourselves. And because of that, we forget that maybe sometimes it's just humor, and sometimes, but then anything that the countries do or say about us feels like like fingers being pointed at us.
Yeah.
Feels like we are lacking something because of the footing that we lost when we did. And because of that, we're constantly trying to prove ourselves and like throw an answer back on their faces, which we do. We definitely do that.
Sometimes people take advantage of that.
About that, it should be about like us as well. We forget that while we're thriving as a country, like on the global imperative, we are developing. But for us, this is the best we've gotten so far, and we should be proud of that. We shouldn't have this inferiority complex about this, right? That we are not as good as America in a certain thing. Okay, sure, maybe we're not, but we are better than what we had before, if you get what I mean. And I feel like there's this pressure on Indians especially, because we want to throw that answer back. So we put this pressure, we project this pressure on our athletes as well. And instead of just being professionals who are doing their jobs and they also have this added burden on them and like weight of like the nation's expectations, which is not fair to them, and it's not healthy for us either. Which brings me to my next point, which is like why do you like Manu Bhaker and Vinesh Phogat deserve fair media treatment? We've discussed the media treatment before, but let's get into a little more about why, like bringing in the point before, how we've elevated them to such heights and we're trying to humiliate them whenever they don't do what we want them to do, right? Why do you think, like, why shouldn't they deserve this fair respect, right? So what do you think about that?
Yeah, of course. So now that now that the dust is settled and we see Vinesh Phogat get into Congress, right? And we see Manu Bhaker promoting her brand and medals, appearing on celebrity events, on page 3 events and celebrity events. So you can pretty much ensure that the media scrutiny is going to be higher than ever, and they know that as well. So it's somewhat of a very cynical perspective of where we are as a world right now. They know that the cameras are going to be on them, and they're going to generate headlines, and they're going to feed on those headlines to expand their brand. If you remember, not to, and this is an example I don't really like taking, Smriti Irani, if you remember, she used to be an actress on a TV soap. You remember that?
Right.
And now she's a public figure. I most of her supporters, I am not even sure whether they remember she used to be an actress. And so what they've done, it's a double-edged sword. So the way it works is that you can use the media, it's fine, but you have to be ready for both. If you're ready for praise, you have to be ready for criticism. And there's an interesting article I read about Manu Bhaker's constant appearances on celebrity events, and this was from a very famous journalist. He mentioned specifically that her team should advise her to just be a little bit moderate about her self promotion, because if she overdoes it, then collectively this is not gonna put a bad taste in the mouth of the majority. And India is all about the majority; it's about the mob, and they don't necessarily believe in being subtle. So they're going to come after her, and they're going to attack her every opportunity she gets. Now, if she's thick-skinned enough, she will use that as the advantage to become like a Kangna Ranaut type figure. I wanna believe she's better than that. Like I believe she'll just use some of that publicity, and she'll just start working hard. Like people like, we talk about Sania Nehwal, we talk about PV Sindhu, Abhinav Bindra. These are fundamentally people who have been performing consistently. Okay, everybody has a media profile and they have to play that game, but fundamentally they get up and they perform, right? So if she does that, I think what she'll do is she'll become more of a balanced figure in the eyes of the public. But if you see her pulling publicity stunts in 5 years down the line, then what's.
Definitely. And like also picking up the point about how you brought up like the actress who's now a public figure, and this is the last time we'll come back to Manu Bhaker and Vinesh Phogat. But the point is that even these sports people, if whatever they're planning on doing next, right, uh, the media, as we talked about, should be asking more relevant questions than just focusing on their lives and what they're using, because they are using this media as the launch pad, like we mentioned, for doing other things. So is sports really like important to them? And like lessening the questions about sports to these people is what is furthering their motive to get away from sports too. Instead, don't you think that they should be asking questions like, do you consider a 2024 Olympics a success for you, or what are your future goals in this area, right? These are reasonable questions that respect their stature, that respect their profession, and also motivate them to continue, because they're like, it's to show that we are interested. We want to know about your sports future. We want to know about your sports career. Only focusing on their lives or what their boyfriends or etc. or girlfriends are doing, or like what their brand endorsement is furthering them away from sports, in my opinion.
Yeah, they need to be, their sports performances now need to be under scrutiny, but it just has to. It's the name of the game. It should be. Press has every right to question their sporting performance and their performance in future events. They have to, it's completely fair for the press and for us sports fans to accept an answer that what are the next goals as an athlete. If you look at any top sports person addresses these questions, they're very clear with what they want to and where they want to be. And and that they have to be judged by their sports performance, and it's very fair. So if their performance level drops, it's completely fair for the media, without being personal, to ask questions about why the sports performance has been declining. Because see, ultimately athletes are something that we invest in, right? And Sania Nehwal, this nice real article on Mint on last month, where she finally addressed the Vinesh Phogat topic. She praised her. First of all, she knows how to play the PR game, and she was very, step one, not make it personal. She praised her, she called her a fighter, but then she said she's also an experienced athlete, so somewhere there's been a mistake on her part as well. She should take at least some of the blame, because before being such a big match, fluctuating on his weight is not right. And but with that being said, I've always seen her working very hard, and I'm sure she'll give her 100%. She
Definitely.
and she also brought an interesting point. Sorry to interrupt. That this is not her first Olympics as well, and there's a sports economy behind her that she's responsible for. Her team of coaches, physios, and trainers, and they would be disappointed by her recent decisions. That was a little bit of an implication. So,
Makes sense. As it should, honestly. I do respect Saina Rural for that.
mm,
And coming to our last segment, now that we've discussed the media, the athletes, and maybe why the funding might be an issue in this country and why the focus is let's talk about where India's focus is on.
yeah, the
Why they
500-pound gorilla of Indian sports. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about where they are actually spending all this money on. And sorry to say, but that is cricket.
Yeah,
Okay.
Shivangi's
We can't-
favorite sport.
Yeah, we certainly can't think about Indian sports without mentioning the elephant in the room, right? Cricket.
Yeah.
And while we discuss further into this, we would like to mention that we do not hate cricket or the athletes who are in cricket, but this is more of an observation and a point that we thought is important to discuss when we are discussing this topic.
Hmm.
Now, one of the first questions that is, going to be posed is, has cricket dominance spoiled the party for everyone else? Because if cricket is getting all the funding and all the advertisements and all the brand endorsements and so much money being put into cricket, has it actually spoiled the entire cake for everyone else? What do you think?
So this is a very interesting. I'm really happy that you'll be closing on such a high note. So the funny, interesting thing that there's been a global discussion of athletes who really benefit from the sport, how much they put back into the sport, right? Because Michael Jordan, we know who he is, right? He became a billionaire, businessman, entrepreneur, but he also put a lot of his money. He bought other sports teams. He built stadiums. He put a lot, and other sports as well, football and baseball. You see David Beckham do the same. You've seen his investments in sports, right? So that brings of somewhat of a nicer image they brings from us, because the narrative, that's not really narrative. They actually put their own millions of dollars into that, so they believe in it. But the thing that they benefited out of that made them so rich and famous, they're using some of that capital back to the sports. And that's the same as seen in any major industry, be it tech industry, be it the movie industry, the music industry. But now the culture has somewhat changed. When you see people really use all the resources that the sporting environment provide you, and when they see you branch out into other things, so that's when they get angry. So that's the same thing with cricket has become. It's taken such a huge, it's become such a huge industry, and people somewhat, while they still idolize the cricketer, things like the T20 World Cup, while it is very financially lucrative, it is lucrative for the cricketers. But what I feel we lack sometimes is maybe some of our top athletes, cricketers, they haven't really given that much back to the sport, not just other sports, but their own sport as well. Or maybe they don't realize that, because ultimately that is their responsibility, right?
Yeah, I mean, it makes you wonder whether cricket is just a sport at this point or
Job,
business.
yes. It is a
Yeah,
business. Yeah, it is. It's become so. It is so media centric, and so much revenue generates not just for cricketers but for media as well. That it's something. It cannot be stopped. It's become like Star Wars. It's gonna go on. Yeah.
yeah, and tying back in that all the other athletes, right? I mean, when was the last time we ever heard about Indian hockey players when our national sport is hockey, right? We barely ever hear anything about them. And, on top of all of this, because this cricket has become such a business and such a showbiz again for everyone and India, uh, does it really makes you think, right? Like, are the other athletes even getting as much funding or attention that cricket athletes even get on a daily basis, right? And where would be the equivalent presence of cricketers in upholding fellow athletes? Like, they have like the platform and influence, but we hardly see them standing up for other sports or athletes. Like, it's all about cricket for them. And like Karan said, we don't even know if they give back enough to improve sport or give chances to people who should be getting chances, right? And at the end, it just feels like there's no balanced approach as of yet. The other sports don't have as much of a chance to grow. And if we want India to do well on the global stage beyond the cricket, then we need to be putting in the funds in the right place. For example, the Paralympic athletes.
Exactly. Yeah. And
So,
there's barely any mention like the story. We won, we celebrated for a little while, and the story went away. And we won the
yeah.
T20 World Cup, and it was like it was like a nationwide rave that could not stop for a week, And yeah,
Yeah. So, to conclude, I guess, now that we've come towards the end of this podcast, today we've covered such a broad range of topics from media dramas to cricket domination, and challenges in developing sports in India are not in a short supply, as we know. But for real progress to materialize, I think we need to adopt more of a balanced approach where each athlete gets the support and recognition that they actually deserve. And it's beyond time to get beyond the stories and actually look at what's more important here, right? Resourcing our athletes as pros and letting them have the support to be successful. So, I want to thank Karan for joining me on this podcast. And this was a lovely discussion. And I'm sure that you all would also find this discussion fruitful. And, we'd love to hear from you about this as well. Do you agree with our points? Do you think that there could be something added about something that we missed out? Let us know on our social media channels. We're there on Instagram, on Twitter. And don't forget to tune in next time when we will be discussing another topic based on SCP Media Foundation. And thank you for listening, everyone. Tune into our podcast On the Spot by MindBrews, and see you again next time.
bye. Thank you, Shivangi. Thanks, everyone. Bye.